Hello and welcome to the Read to Know podcast, where the goal is to actually remember what you read so then you can better apply it to your life. On this podcast, we go through a book one chapter at a time, and then we actually practice remembering what we've read. So if you want to follow along, we're currently working our way through Bob Goff's book, Dream Big. I'm Zach Brown, and my friend Chris Yarber is joining me to help discuss and break down this book. Also, if you're on Apple Podcasts, it would be huge if you left a rating and review for us. It would help out a ton. If you're not on Apple Podcasts, no worries. Just send this to a friend who might be interested. Anyway, thanks again for listening and enjoy the conversation. All right, Chris, we made it to book 2 now.
Woo! Book number 2.
Book 2, Dream Big by Bob Goff. Know what you want, why you want it, and what you're going to do about it. That's the subtitle of this book. Yeah. And I'm really excited to dive in here. And in what I've read just even so far, it's funny looking back because now I think that we've both kind of internalized a lot of what was said in 7 Habits.
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to see that in other things I read, including this book. I don't know, I haven't talked with you before this, but...
No, I certainly have. Yeah. And I know that it maybe in this first episode or this first week, really, and maybe throughout the process of reading and going over this whole book, that we'll constantly be drawing back from 7 Habits, which the deeper we got in 7 Habits, I thought to myself, gosh, I see it all around me now.
Yeah.
But maybe after soaking in this book, we'll be seeing very similar principles just put in different words. Because Bob Goff certainly has an amazing way of communicating.
Yeah.
Not only with his illustrations, which we won't take time to unfold a lot of those because there are a lot of illustrations in this book, but the principles that he pulls from those illustrations are really catching and really memorable. So I'm really excited to go over this book.
That's one of the things I'm excited about, is to not just see these same principles again, but to just see someone else's take on them and the way that they describe it and the way that they internalize those things. And Bob Goff is definitely a hugely different kind of voice than Stephen Covey.
Yes.
Writes in a completely different way, talks in a completely different way.
This book is fun. You will laugh reading this book. You'll laugh reading this book, especially when we get to chapter 2, day 2, the second episode for this particular book. You're gonna laugh at some of the stories that he tells. So it is a lot of fun. But he has a lot of really good messages in it as well.
Yeah. And he even mentions at one point, I'm not sure where this is exactly, but he mentions that he wants this to be something. He said he doesn't want it overly too, high-minded and scholarly and like above most people, but he also doesn't want to dumb down what he's saying as well. This book is kind of aiming at the middle where we all live, pretty much.
Yeah, not too complex.
The most amount of people live. So I think that's a nice kind of thing to get. Just a easy to approach, easy to dive in, easy to apply. Kind of book that's very practical, but also has a serious kind of spiritual and dynamic along with it.
Right. Yeah. Bob Goff, of course, is a Christian. And so we see that in his writings. You see that in Love Does and in Everybody Always, and also Dream Big, of course. So we may talk a little bit more from that angle, or talk a little bit more about Jesus just because it is in this book more than in Stephen Covey's. But whether you're a Christian or not, listening to this or watching this, these principles can be taken and applied to your life, and it can make a really big difference, especially with this first point in this first chapter, which we've gotten to, which is entitled Don't Go Alone, which when I read that chapter, I always think of Don't Go It Alone, which you introduced me to that phrase. I had never heard that phrase before, Don't Go It Alone. But he pretty much says, what that chapter is about right from the start, from the very first sentence, which is, when it comes to chasing your dreams, to dreaming big, be surrounded by people that love you well, which is such a comforting fact for him to start off his book with this. And then from there, he goes into an illustration about his wife and how they are very different from one another, but they don't see those differences as keeping them away from the direction that they're headed from their dreams, but actually that their differences help each other a lot. But yeah, don't go alone. This first chapter about surrounding yourself with people that love you.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the intro and then also this first chapter, kind of group those two things together. And going forward with this book, I'm thinking that, Bob has a lot of great stories packed throughout all of these chapters. And, it's better, if you want to listen to these stories, it's better that you get them directly from Bob, because we probably can't do them justice as well as he can. So hopefully, to those of you listening, hopefully you're following along, reading the chapters with us, and then joining us here for the podcast. But for us here, the couple things that I think would be best to cover is just kind of an overview of the entire chapter, what he's kind of trying to get across to us, and then our big takeaways. So what are our big takeaways, and how can we kind of then put that forth into our own lives? What does that mean for us? And then just kind of discuss that and break that down a little bit. Then we'll pull out the book and talk about some of our favorite specific quotes that he gives. So in this intro, he just kind of gives a breakdown of this entire book. And basically, when he says dream big, it's like you have just kind of digging back into yourself, like just kind of really taking the time to stop and think and be like, hey, what do I want my life to look like? What do I want to accomplish? When it's all said and done, what is really important, and then what have I done to fulfill those things that are important to me? And he says that, the subtitle is know what you want, why you want it, and what you're going to do about it. And, that pretty much sums it up, I think. And I think it's just a powerful thing, like very similar to, a Stephen Covey habit to begin with the end in mind kind of idea. But this one is more of like, I think he has the idea of what makes you tick, you know what I mean? And let's try and tap into that, which is a great idea that most of us, I think, we often forget about in just the daily minutia of life. We get in a cycle and we keep going and going and going, and then we forget, then we'll be like, I'm not really, as he says here, you might wake up one day and be like, okay, this is maybe where I thought I wanted to be, but it's not now. And what do I do? I'm stuck. How do I get out of this? Where do I go from here? That type of thing. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what this Dream Big book is about. But yes, like you said, the first chapter is don't go alone. And he starts off, I find it interesting. He doesn't start off with what do you want to do, or what's most important to you. He starts off with relationships. That's how he starts this book off, which I find very interesting. Yeah,
well, and I'm not really surprised by reading some of his other stuff, because he is really relationship centered. But that is interesting. It's the first conclusion that he comes to is something that you don't expect, and it's really concentrating on other people in your life and surrounding yourself, having that circle of influence, as we've talked about before, that supports you and loves you and is excited for you. And he starts off by saying that's what matters, which lended me to ask, well, what does that have to do with me chasing my dreams and my ambitions and dreaming big? But he goes into that and deals throughout other chapters as well, why that's so important.
Right. And basically, I think breaking this down through this chapter here, it's kind of like that saying, you probably heard it, you're the aggregate of the 5 people you spend the most time around, and that the people who you surround yourself with play a huge impact into your life and influence you heavily, whether you know it or want it or not. And so basically what he's saying here is, the first step is to just find people that you can surround yourself with that will encourage you and not discourage you in what you're trying to accomplish, and can be like, hey, I have this thing that I really want to tackle, I really want to take on, and that person says, go for it, I'm behind you, like, let's do it, like, and I think that's huge with starting out, that's what happened when I came to you. That's what happened when I came to you about this podcast. I was like, hey, I have this idea for a podcast. It's kind of weird. I don't know if anyone's done anything like this before, but I'm interested in it. I kind of want to try it. And you were like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened.
So you came to me and asked about the podcast, and I did not think, like you said, I did not think that anybody else was doing something like this before. But after doing it now for a whole book, you really see the power, and this is what he's talking about in the first chapter, is you really see the power in relationships, not just in remembering what you read or living something out, but in chasing your dreams and in the context in which he's writing in, how important this is. So this really bleeds out to every single area of our life, very similar to what we talked about in the first book.
Right. Yeah, and I think it even sometimes goes beyond just emotional support, like, hey, I'm rooting for you, that type of thing, which is still important. But even the fact that, like, if I did this podcast on my own and I was just here alone in a room by myself, it wouldn't be as good as if you were here. And, when it's better that you're here doing this with me. And it makes the whole process and the whole final outcome, the product, all that makes it better that, that I have people here doing this with me. Right.
And it doesn't mean that, as we live and concentrate on relationships and make this a priority, that life is then going to be easier or chasing your ambitions is going to become any less difficult, because that's not necessarily true. We all know that life gets a little messier with people involved. Yeah. But it does make the journey worthwhile. It also allows you to trek a little bit longer. And I think he sees that. So I really enjoyed reading this first chapter.
Yep. Very true. So you ready to pull out the book here?
Yeah, I have a couple of quotes. I wanted to read this first sentence, if I can just start off with the first sentence.
Yeah, well, do you have anything from the introduction?
No, but you did. I just remembered you had something from the introduction, so go ahead.
So a couple quick things from the introduction here. I find it funny. He said, never change, that was written in his yearbook by at least a dozen people. He said it's the worst advice he'd ever received. We're supposed to change constantly into kinder, humbler, more faithful versions of our old selves. And he says the next version of you is the one who will pursue the ambitions all the previous versions were unable to accomplish. And I like that. I like that ideology. You know what I mean? Like, again, he's saying, changes. One, it's always going to happen. And two, it's actually a good thing. Change is a good thing. And a lot of times we're so, even, I think of this all the time. I'm so reluctant to change. And really, the more we embrace change, the more things will happen, and we'll actually end up becoming and doing the things that we're supposed to be. But yeah, moving on. Let's see. Is there anything else in the introduction here that I want to cover? No, I think that was it. That was the big thing that I like that stuck out to me in the introduction. So yeah, chapter 1, what do you got?
Yeah, chapter 1, first sentence, he starts it off. If you are serious about your dream, surround yourself, with people who love you well, is the whole synopsis as we get from the title of the chapter of this particular book. And that's what he spends the rest of his time talking about.
Right, yeah. And in talking about, he was talking about his wife and things, and how that she's very clear on what she wants and why she wants it and what she's going to do about it. And I like he says here, she knows that God doesn't compare what he creates. And she knows what she wants, why she wants it, and what she's going to do about it. Having this kind of clarity is rare and beautiful and unstoppable. And I just like that, God doesn't compare what he creates, but again, it's something that we fall into a lot, is the comparison trap, keeping up with the Joneses, all of that. And that actually, comparing yourself here to other people, it actually can hinder you from taking those steps forward towards your ambition, your dream.
Right. Yeah, and really what he's saying, just in different words, is that to God, no matter how different you may be from other people, you are enough. He doesn't have favorites, that kind of thing. And he even says here that Sweet Marie and I could not be more different. And then later on, he says, perhaps you felt like you were different than your friends or family. And he says right off the bat that that's a good thing. And we're going to need to settle into who God created us to be if we're going to move ahead. We need to settle in. We need to get used to it. We need to come to that reality that we are different from other people. And God intended it that way. And he said that it's a good thing for us to settle into that, so we know how we're going to move ahead.
Yeah. The last quote that I want to touch on here, he says, as you embark on this journey to identify your ambitions, find these kind of people to surround yourself with. It'll be worth the effort.
Yeah.
And basically saying here, finishing up, kind of ending up this chapter with, if you surround yourself, if you take the time and the effort to kind of find and surround yourself with people who will support you, who are a good friend, that can back you up with things, desires, and ideas and ambitions that you might have, that the work even put in just to find those kind of people and surround yourself with them, it'll be worth the effort for sure.
Yeah, because like you said, he says take the time, which shows that it takes a little bit of effort. It is going to take a little bit of sacrifice. It may mean ending some relationships or starting some new ones, but finding those people as you begin to embark on this journey, as he says, as you begin to identify your ambitions, these are the kinds of people you want to surround yourself with. So really good stuff for this short chapter.
Yeah, that's the end of the chapter. I mean, short and sweet, but that's what these daily episodes are going to be like. So I really enjoyed that. I'm excited to continue with the rest of these.
Yes, yeah. Tomorrow, chapter 2 with thermometer is a funny chapter. So I'm looking forward to sharing some about that and getting into some specifics.
Yep. Thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you tomorrow for chapter 2, thermometer.